Hello everybody, this is Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-Minute Histories videos. And today I'm inside Emmanuel Church here in Mount Vernon on Cathedral Street. If you're like me, you have walked past and driven past this building a million times, but today we're going to slow down a little bit and take a deeper look from its beginnings in the 1850s up through the present, with some notable chapters in between, including a connection with our own John Waters, the filmmaker. I'm thrilled that I'm going to be joined by Reverend Anne-Marie Richards, who's going to talk a little bit about what's going on here today. But let's start in 1854. That's when the congregation raised $50,000 to build this church. They turned to probably the preeminent architects of the day, a firm called Nearncy and Nielsen. If you haven't heard of them, I know you know some of their other works, including the Great Dome at Hopkins Hospital and the wonderful chapel at Greenmount Cemetery. Those are from Nearncy and Nielsen as well. Today, you don't see much of the Nearncy and Nielsen work here at Emmanuel, and that's because in 1912, the congregation hired a new reverend named Hugh Burkhead. And Burkhead went on about a 15-year building spree that changed the building and the campus really dramatically. The first thing he did is raise the roof, literally raise the roof. He made it higher, accommodating the wonderful stained glass window that's behind me, the east window. It came over from England in 1915, dodging U-boats, German U-boats, along the way. World War I had begun. And incidentally, the altar that's underneath that window was designed by another famous architect named Henry Vaughan. You know his work because he designed the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. One of the other things that if Burkhead did is if he raised the roof, he also raised the floor, allowing for a little chapel to be built underneath where we're standing today. In that little chapel, a few years later, a gentleman named George Marshall got married. That would be General Marshall to you and me, the Marshall Plan that guided reconstruction of Europe after World War II. That's the same guy. His best man was a gentleman named John Pershing, and of course, that's General Pershing. The two generals were here for his wedding. The next thing that Reverend Burkhead did was turn a little sort of priest's changing room, prep room, into what was called the Peace Chapel, dedicated 2 years after the end of World War I, so in 1920. And it's got a wonderful design, including some whimsical carvings. There is an owl holding a lantern, a toad underneath a toadstool. There is a rabbit holding a shotgun, and maybe my favorite, a horse reading a book. Not sure why they're there, but they're really wonderful little things. Maybe the most notable change that Reverend Burkhead did, though, was build the tower out front, the great tower that you can see everywhere. It is Gothic design, and if you're wondering, it's specifically Flemish Gothic. If you walked through Flanders, you'd see all sorts of towers like this. And it has got a lot going on up there. It's got musicians carved into the archway above the door. It's got the three magi up there, each 14 feet tall. It's got Joseph carrying a carpenter's tool, carpenter square, I believe. It's got a young shepherd carrying a lamb, and an old shepherd with his hands cupped to his ears, I guess, trying to hear the musicians. And of course, it's got Jesus above the front door. The master carver for all that was a gentleman named Johann Kirchmeier. Really fantastic. All right, before I turn it over to Reverend Richards, let me just say a word about the spaces here. For generations, Emmanuel has been welcoming to its neighbors in Mount Vernon and really to all of Baltimore. I know a couple years ago I saw a show here, and I'm going to butcher the name, La Cage aux Folles, that sort of avant show. But if it were 1966 and you were here, you would have seen another avant show, and that was the premiere of John Waters' second movie, I believe, Roman Candles. This is the one that featured Divine, who of course went on to become a superstar. There's a little bit of a discussion over whether the church really knew what they were doing when they premiered Waters' movie. It was edgy and avant for sure, but I think they did, because the next year they let him in again to premiere another movie, this one called Eat Your Makeup. And then the year after that, 1968, I believe, he premiered Mondo Trasho. And for sure, by that point, the church had embraced all of the John Waters that you could embrace, and is continuing doing that with this new building campaign. But I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Richards to talk about that. All right, Reverend, we are all yours.
Hi, I'm Anne Marie Richards, and I am a priest of the Episcopal Church, and I am the rector of Emmanuel Church, Baltimore. Our building is used by probably more people than on a day-to-day basis I even remember. We have a number of 12-step recovery groups that meet here every week. We have a post-incarceration ministry called HOPE, Helping Oppressed People Excel, that gathers here. We ourselves have an active concert series once a month in our Tuesdays at 6 concerts, which tend to be chamber music, and then we do other choral concerts and visiting artists and all sorts of things. And of course we have church on Sunday and at other times during the week. So a lot happens in the building. About 30 or so years ago, certainly 20 years ago, Emmanuel began to talk about the fact that our beautiful historic building was not accessible to people of different abilities. You had to encounter stairs even to get into the church itself, into the sanctuary. And those conversations went on, and a lot of them involved things like, yes, it would be nice to fix, change, whatever, but money. As I was arriving in 2019, the conversation had really picked up again, and it was exciting, and fundraising had started. And then we had a pandemic, as everyone knows. And yet, people at Emmanuel had really decided once and for all that this needed to happen. And so we raised money. We had a capital campaign during a worldwide pandemic. Everyone said, don't do it, it'll never work. And grace and a lot of hard work, it did happen. So where we're standing now today is on the upper level of the church, the same level where we have our choir room and the great hall. And I'm standing in front of an elevator. We can get from every level of the church buildings to every other level without having to use stairs. Through an amazing design process, our architect was able to just fully integrate into an historic building this technology that is an elevator. It's not new technology, but for us, it is life-giving. And we've incorporated elements of the building from the outside. So this is reclaimed stone from an exterior wall that had to be taken down in order to accommodate the new elevator and stairs. We matched flooring where we could and trim where we could and tried to blend the old and the new as seamlessly as possible. But far more than how we built or what we built is the amazing result of being able to welcome everybody into this beautiful old building.